what if the history you were taught wasn't just, incomplete?
Right.
What if it was actually a deliberate engineered fabrication designed specifically to strip men of their agency?
That's a massive question.
Yeah, and I don't just mean getting a date wrong here or there. I mean, what if the entire narrative structure of the West was rewritten to frame the builders of civilization as its villains? That's the very provocative question we're tackling today on this deep dive.
It really is heavy, and it completely reframes how we look at the modern world. I mean, it suggests that what we consider common knowledge is actually a psychological operation.
Absolutely. And before we descend into this rabbit hole, and trust me, it goes really deep. If you enjoy deep dives into these kinds of controversial, hidden, and frankly mind-bending topics, make sure you like and subscribe to the show right now.
It really does help us out.
Yeah, it helps us keep the lights on, the research flowing, so we can bring you this kind of unfiltered analysis.
Definitely. And today, we are unpacking a source that is making some serious waves in the underground right now.
Oh, yeah.
We're looking at the ebook, Race Communism Theory, Rewriting History in Bad Faith to Attack America by Conrad Reicher.
And look, let me just tell you up front, this is not a light beach read.
No.
It's being positioned as this ultra-long, incisive, and fascinating manifesto, written specifically for a men's rights, red pill, and manosphere audience. Reicher isn't pulling any punches here.
No, he certainly isn't. He frames this text not just as a history book or some political critique. He calls it an operational manual for the new masculine West.
Right.
It's dense, it's aggressive, and it covers everything from history to economics to biology.
Exactly. So if what we discussed today resonates with you, or if you just want to see the data for yourself and make up your own mind, you really need to check Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy the book immediately.
And you can also follow the author.
Yeah, Conrad Reicher. He has a Substack at Conrad Reicher where he posts unfiltered analysis. Highly recommend checking that out.
Yeah. So our mission today is to unpack his central theory.
Yeah, let's get into it.
We want to look at his argument for how our institutions were captured by feminists and Marxists, this whole concept of race communism, and most importantly, his proposed exit strategy for modern men.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we need to be clear. We are just imparting the ideas from the source material here.
Right, we aren't taking sides, just analyzing the text.
Exactly. We're impartial observers taking a deep dive into the arguments. And Reicher starts with what he calls the great historical heist.
He argues that we are living on a bedrock of lies.
So what is the core of this deception?
Well, his central thesis is that race communism is this bad faith rewriting of history. He argues the narrative has been manipulated to specifically demonize white men and the nuclear family.
Just totally targeted.
Right. He argues that if you strip away a man's pride in his ancestors, you break his capacity to resist in the present. And he points to the history of slavery as the smoking gun for this whole deception.
This is where it gets really interesting for me, because he brings up historical events that I honestly barely remember hearing about in school, if at all.
Yeah, he talks about the West African Squadron.
Walk us through that. Why is this specific historical detail the cornerstone of his argument?
It's vital because it supports his theory of what he calls asymmetrical virtue. Reicher highlights a statistic that Britain spent nearly 2% of its entire GDP between 1808 and 1860 to actually end the global slave trade.
2% of GDP. That is an astronomical amount of money for a 19th century economy.
Huge.
That's like a modern superpower completely bankrupting itself for moral cause.
Precisely. And it wasn't just money. Reicher details how the Royal Navy's West African Squadron lost thousands of sailors to disease and combat while patrolling the African coast.
Wow.
His argument is that slavery was a universal human constant since the dawn of time, practiced by every race on every continent. But the West, he argues, was the only civilization to actively sacrifice its own blood and treasure to stop it.
So his point is, instead of being the villains of slavery, the West was actually the only civilization to actively fight to end it.
That is his contention, yes. And he contrasts this with what he calls the memory hold history of the Barbary slave trade.
The pirates.
Yeah. Reicher asserts that over 1.25 million Europeans were enslaved by North African pirates. He also brings up the Arab slave trade, and he describes it in very graphic terms as an industrial castration factory.
That's intense.
He notes that the mortality rate for African boys in that specific trade was just horrific.
It's a stark contrast. He's basically saying, why are we only taught one side of the ledger?
And that is the absolute core of race communism theory as he defines it. He argues this broader history is suppressed to maintain a narrative of unique white villainy.
So that's the asymmetrical virtue.
Exactly. The idea that while slavery was a universal human practice, the West's unique achievement was its abolition. Riker claims if you ignore the universal nature of the crime, you manufacture a narrative that specifically targets one group.
And he doesn't stop there, does he? He goes right after the 1619 Project, which has obviously been a massive topic in cultural debates recently.
Oh, he goes right at it. He attempts to refute the idea that American slavery was purely racial in origin by pointing to the case of Anthony Johnson.
Right, the black man who owned slaves in Virginia. I've heard this mentioned in passing before, but Riker really digs into the legal history here.
He does. He cites court records from 1655 where Johnson, a black man, successfully sued to keep a black indentured servant named John Casor as a slave for life.
Okay.
Riker uses this specific case to argue that slavery was originally an economic institution based on class, practiced by men of all races, before it ever became racialized.
So he's trying to decouple the institution of slavery from that original sin narrative.
Because he believes that narrative is being used to psychologically disarm modern men.
Right. So if the history's the trap, what does this all mean for the modern man? Because Riker isn't just looking at the past, he's looking at your wallet too.
Very much so.
Which brings us to one of the most provocative concepts in the book, the net lifetime taxpayer.
This is where the economic argument hits really hard, and it moves the book from defense to offense. Riker introduces the concept of the NLT, the net lifetime taxpayer.
Okay, unpack that.
He claims that if you look at the data, statistically, only men, and he specifies white and Asian men, pay more into the system over their lifetimes than they take out in services and benefits.
That is a staggering claim to make.
It is.
It essentially says the entire state apparatus is funded by a single specific demographic. So what does that make everyone else?
He defines everyone else as net tax consumers. He argues this group includes women as a demographic bloc, along with what he calls the parasitic elite.
The parasitic elite.
Yeah, and this leads directly into his concept of the gynocentric state.
A gynocentric state. Yeah, it sounds like he's implying the government has literally taken over a biological role.
That's exactly it. He argues the state now functions as a surrogate husband. The idea is that the state extracts resources from productive men via taxes to fund women and the welfare state.
Right.
Essentially, the government fulfills the provider role, which makes the actual husband completely obsolete.
And he links this directly to divorce laws, doesn't he?
Yes, heavily. He describes no-fault divorce not as some sort of liberation, but as a weapon of asset seizure.
Wow.
He calls the divorce industrial complex a machine designed to strip men of their capital. He explicitly calls the modern marriage contract a suicide pact for men.
A suicide pact.
Yeah,
Because the state creates this parasitic loop.
exactly. Men work, men pay taxes, and those taxes fund the very institutions that break up their families.
So Riker's arguing that male labor is literally funding the DEI commissars and the HR departments that are actively working to disenfranchise those same men.
It's a direct transfer of wealth from the productive to the destructive in his view.
Yep.
You are paying the salary of the person who is writing the policy to hire someone else instead of you.
Man. And that really segues perfectly into the psychological aspect of this whole theory.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about money being moved around, it's about what he terms emotional terrorism.
That is a key term in the manifesto. Riker describes emotional terrorism, or he sometimes calls it the gynocentric shiv.
The gynocentric shiv.
Yeah.
That's vivid.
Right. He argues that in modern discourse, feelings are routinely used to bypass logic, or what he calls logos.
Logos versus feelings. I mean, we see this conflict everywhere in modern media.
We do. And Riker posits that there is this compliance class, which he characterizes as HR cat ladies, who enforce ideological purity.
Okay.
So if you use logic or facts that make someone feel unsafe or offended, you are attacked. The emotional response just completely overrides the factual reality. He calls this a war on competence.
And he connects this to biology, too. This part really blew my mind, this sperm apocalypse.
Yeah.
Is he speaking metaphorically there?
Not at all. He is referencing hard data regarding the precipitous drop in testosterone and sperm counts in the West over the last few decades. Riker calls it the test of vital force.
So what's causing it, according to him?
He theorizes that plastics, endocrine disruptors, and even soy, which is where the term soy boy comes from, are tools being used to chemically castrate the population.
So he literally sees diet as political.
Absolutely. He frames the great food pyramid lie as a way to keep men weak and docile.
That's wild.
He contrasts the veganism, which he sees as submission, with the carnivore diet, which he views as rebellion.
Carnivore's rebellion.
Yeah, for Riker, a high testosterone male is a genuine threat to the system because he is harder to control. If you lower the testosterone, you lower the resistance.
That is quite the theory.
Yeah.
And he links this lack of competence directly to real-world infrastructure failures.
He does. He heavily critiques DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, arguing that it prioritizes identity over aptitude.
Right.
He points to infrastructure failures, like the Baltimore Bridge collapse or recent issues with airline safety, as proof.
So he's saying these aren't accidents.
He calls it the inversion of merit, where true competence is labeled toxic masculinity and incompetence is celebrated as equity. He argues that when you prioritize feelings over physics, bridges fall down.
It's a pretty bleak picture he paints. History is a lie, your money is being stolen, and your biology is being sabotaged.
It is bleak.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting for the reader, Riker doesn't just want men to sit around and complain on the internet. He actually has a plan.
That's right. He devotes a significant portion of the book to the New Jerusalem.
The New Jerusalem.
This is his exit strategy. He wants men to stop funding the system that hates them and start building parallel institutions.
One of the big tools he mentions for this is Bitcoin. Now, usually when people talk crypto, they're talking about investment portfolios or whatever.
Yeah.
But Riker frames it totally differently.
He views Bitcoin as masculine energy.
Masculine energy.
Yeah. He calls it proof of work money that fundamentally cannot be seized by the state. He references the Canadian trucker convoy, where bank accounts were frozen.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
He uses that as proof that you need money outside the system. If your money is in a traditional bank, it's not really yours. It's just permitted to be yours until you disobey.
Right.
Bitcoin, in his view, represents the only property rights that exist entirely outside the gynocentric state.
And he also talks about leaving the West entirely, right? The passport bro philosophy.
He calls it geographic arbitrage. The strategy is to move to countries with traditional values and lower taxes.
Makes sense from an economic standpoint.
Riker argues that if the West is a system that treats you like a resource to be exploited, the rational move is to take your labor and your capital elsewhere. It's voting with your feet.
He also mentions the gig economy as a way to escape the HR gulags.
Yes. Becoming a sovereign freelancer means you don't have to sit through diversity seminars or worry about being fired for a microaggression.
You're your own boss.
It's about total economic independence. You become a merc, essentially. You sell your skills, not your soul.
But what about when you have to engage? I mean, you can't always just leave society entirely. He talks about something called rhetorical self-defense.
This is a fascinating section. He advocates for relearning the trivium,
Which is?
grammar, logic, and rhetoric. He wants men to use frame control.
Give me an example of that. How does a guy actually use frame control in a normal conversation?
Well, Riker suggests rejecting terms like white privilege or toxic masculinity outright.
Just don't accept the premise.
Exactly. Instead of apologizing or debating on their terms, you reject the premise entirely. He references the Schopenhauer stratagem.
Okay, what's that?
It essentially means using mockery and aggressive logic. If someone accuses you of something based purely on emotion, you don't validate it with a serious defense response. You dismantle the logic or you just mock the absurdity of it.
So it's really about reclaiming the narrative. You don't let them set the rules of the game.
Completely. And ultimately, he envisions this masculine singularity.
Masculine singularity.
A society built by these net lifetime taxpayers where votes are actually tied to contributions. In his view, if you fund the civilization, you should be the one running it.
Right.
It's a vision where logic rules over emotion. It's essentially a separatist movement for high agency men.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've gone from the great historical heist to the sperm apocalypse, all the way to building a new Jerusalem with Bitcoin.
It is a lot to take in.
It's massive.
And Riker intends it to be overwhelming in a sense. He wants to shock the reader into a completely new perspective. The core message is that the current social contract is fundamentally broken for men.
Yeah.
And the only solution is to withdraw consent and build something new.
It's definitely a perspective you won't hear in the mainstream media, that's for sure.
Huh?
And to reiterate, we're not endorsing this worldview. We're just fascinated by the depth of the argument being made here.
And that's exactly why he wrote it. He sees this as an information war. He believes that once you see the architecture of the lie, as he calls it, you just can't unsee it.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. If you found these ideas compelling, or even if you just want to see the arguments firsthand so you can make up your own mind, You really should check Amazon Kindle and Google Playbooks to buy Race Communism Theory by Conrad Riker.
Highly recommend checking out the source material directly.
Yeah, it sounds like the kind of book you need to have in your library before someone tries to ban it.
Absolutely. And don't forget to follow him at Conrad Riker on Substack for his unfiltered analysis. That is where the real-time strategy is happening day to day.
Definitely. And hey, if you made it this far, please like and subscribe to the Deep Dive.
Please do.
We love bringing you these deep explorations into topics that no one else is brave enough to talk about. But we really need your support to keep going.
It really helps the show reach more people who are looking for exactly this kind of content.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought. Something Riker brings up that really sticks with you. It just cuts through all the noise.
It's a question of loyalty.
Exactly. If the civilization you live in relies entirely on your labor to function, but simultaneously demonizes your existence and your history, is it an act of treason to leave it? Or is leaving the ultimate act of self-respect?
That is the question every man has to answer for himself.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.